Hello, first year students. On Wednesday, at least in this term, you'll be having a paper quiz, in-class quiz on the things we've been studying this term so far. So cadences, setting up a 4-part chorale style voicing. In other words, putting the notes on the page for SATB. Connection methods for when the same chord but the melody changes. We have 3 of those. And small forms or phrase forms. And I promised you a reminder and a kind of review because we're over, in this case, a long holiday weekend. And I feel like maybe you're going to be less sure about these things. So we're just going to review some of this. Some of this will go into more detail and others. But let's just talk about what it means to define cadences. And remember, you're still new at these things. This part is to affirm, catalyze, and get you ready so that we can take this basic information and apply it to analysis and writing and things like that. So let's talk about defining cadences. First off, before I list them up, take a minute and see if you can remember what the names of all the cadences were. This is actually an important step to memorizing them. If you don't know how many there are, for instance, then you don't know whether one's slipped your memory or not. So it's a good idea to categorize these things. That will be true when we get into connection method formulas for all kinds of different, like are they the same chord, or is it chords with roots a second or seventh apart, a third or sixth apart, a fourth or fifth apart. There'll be several for each one of these voicing types and or connection types, and so you need to keep straight not just the formulas and execute them correctly, but which ones go for which. So actually it's important to remember what they are, starting off with how many, or you can go through the categories. Okay, let's think about this for a minute. There are 2 kinds of authentic cadences, right? Authentic cadences. There's a half cadence, right? And can you think of how many other ones there are that aren't that? There's something called a deceptive cadence. And there's one that we will include and one that we won't do this time around. The other one is the plagal cadence. And there's something called the Phrygian cadence that we've mentioned, and we're not going to worry about it. We've talked about it in terms of its historical significance, but you really want to be strong on these ones. So now that we have those there, you see that you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 cadences you have to have definitions for, and we're going to have to know the difference between the 2 different kinds of authentic cadence. There's the imperfect. So if you couldn't remember that, then you should say, that's something I need to study. Even before, you could say, like, I'm fine if you prompt me on these, but, well, you're not fine if you haven't committed them that way first. So go, like, I've got 5 cadences, I need to remember what they are, and then there's this Phrygian one on the side. All right, so let's see. If I were answering this first off, I'd say that an authentic cadence, okay, authentic cadences are ones that have leading tone chords, going to tonic chords, which means it's going to be a 5 or a 5, 7, 5, 9, etc., or a 7, and its extensions as well. Going to a 1, or could be a 1, you know, right? The leading tone is in these chords, so it's usually 5, 5, 7, 7, 7 half diminished 7, 7 fully diminished 7, going to its tonic, right? That's an authentic cadence. What makes it perfect and what makes it imperfect? Okay, so perfect has 3 definitions that need to be met, or conditions. Equals real 5 chord, so basically not a 7, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is And these are things you want to be able to regurgitate and have memorized, right? Second thing is the 5 and the 1 are in root position. Okay, it means that the lowest note for both these chords are the root. And number 3, last thing, 1 chord also root in top voice or melody, highest voice. Okay? If it's an authentic cadence and it has these 3 things, then you call it perfect authentic cadence. All other ones are imperfect. Okay? If it doesn't meet any or more than one of those, it's imperfect. I know that a lot of textbooks will talk about leading tone and inverted 5s and try and give you like shades of gray on how definitive it is and make a spectrum there, but we just really care about this to begin with, right? Okay. Half cadences is anything, so half is anything to a 5, okay, ending on a 5. It's a very progressive cadence saying I'm not done, right? It's a pit stop. Deceptive cadence. Deceptive cadence is something that makes you think it's going to be an authentic cadence. So leading tone chord, right? Leading tone chord that does not go to 1. Okay, so it deceived you. It was set up like an authentic cadence and it said but. Okay, and the most common one of those is 6, or if you're in the minor, 6. Although there are some variants on that as well. Okay, but that's the most common variety. But anything that's got a leading tone, right, 5s or 7s, that makes you think we're going to 1 and then it doesn't. Okay, that's deceptive. And last one, plagal. Well, it's a non-leading tone chord. I know in class we've just said, oh, call it 4 to 1 and call these 5 to 1s or 5 to 6s and things, but broader definition, non-leading tone chord that goes to tonic. That's plagal. The most common thing is 4, could be 4 in the minor, going to 1. Sometimes 1 in the minor like that. Sometimes it's called the amen cadence because after you've done, you know, it goes amen. You'll hear that at the end of some hymns. And it's often found after you've done a sectional authentic cadence. It'll throw it on the end. Go listen to the end of the first movement of the Brahms First Symphony. You'll see something like that. It's done great. Yeah, so you should be able to define them. You should also, if I throw some cadences in front of you, be able to work out what chords they are and what chords they are for the key and stuff like that. Although I think on this test right now, we're just testing on this informational part, right? Might have you match them, might have you define them, might have you write out and tell me what they are to begin with, but probably not too much score work on this because this is our first sort of like, do you just have the definitions figured out? If you don't, then it's really hard to do analysis because you have to reach back and think, now what is that again? In addition to figuring out what the chords are notated as. All right, so there's your cadences. I'm not going to talk too much about 4-part choral voicing rules. You had a worksheet in class and you have a video online in Canvas, maybe in YouTube as well, where it goes over all the different stems up, stems down, what staff are you on, are your voices crossed over, is the score order correct, so the sopranos are above altos and above tenors and, you know, above basses, and spacing is no more than a perfect octave between soprano and alto and tenor, but you can have any space between the bass and the tenor. And so you have a worksheet for that. You can download it again, redo it, and I think you're pretty good for those. There are connection methods, though, that we needed to talk about. And again, here, you should say, well, how many connection methods do I have for, you know, these are formulas for when the melody changes, but the chord does not. And the answer is we have three methods, right? These are formulas. I guess the fourth formula is don't. Just say no, right? That's always an option. You could have improper doubling or for the formula, or you could do something different and it can still work. But our methods are where we start from. Okay, and then can you remember what we called them? Give me a second. You should write that down. You can pause the video. I'm going to go on. But you should have move with soprano. You should have contrary motion, voice, vox is short for voice exchange, and you should have similar motion, voice exchange. And again, you're going to want to keep these straight as we learn them. These are the first ones we did, and we've even written some music with it, and hopefully this is helping you remember, but there's one, and there's one. Then you should be able to define them. These voices do this, that voices does this, these voices do that. And then you should be able to draw them and then probably even recognize them. I wouldn't look at these exactly just like lists of things to memorize. I'd write them and then I would define them. And then more than that, I'd contrast them against each other. I'm gonna say them and then we'll talk about that. So this is the soprano moves up or down. The other two upper voices, alto and tenor, move in the same direction to the next chord tone. Bass stays on the same note, okay? This one here is the soprano moves in opposite direction to usually the tenor, and they exchange pitches, right? Even though they switch notes, either collapse in together or open up together. And then the alto and the bass do nothing, right? And then similar motion voice exchanges, the alto and the soprano move in the same direction, up or down, and they switch pitches, pitch names, and then the bass and the tenors do nothing. And this one here is special because these ones only move one chord tone, right? To an adjacent chord tone in the soprano, but this one actually skips one, so you get a larger leap bigger than a fourth, basically, right? So what I mean by compare and contrast is, like, for instance, all of these, okay, bass stays the same, right? So that's the same right there, okay? But, for instance, this one here is usually soprano and tenor are moving. And this one here is usually soprano and alto are moving. And this one here, soprano, alto, and tenor are all moving, right? Or you could say, well, who's not moving? The alto and the bass are not moving. And this one here, the tenors and the bass are not moving, right? So if you think about that, that will help you, like, memorize them, not just the terms and the sentences of what they do, but think about what they mean. Okay, so you should be able to define those, and then we should be able to write them. So I've got you set up here, and these are already set up correctly. They have 2 roots, a third, and a fifth. If I haven't made mistakes, it's possible. And you have to execute them, and they'll be labeled, right? So let's do this one here. We'll go contrary motion voice exchange. Okay, and we will do move with soprano here, and we will do similar motion voice exchange. Okay, so let's go through the steps on this. We've been through this a bunch of times, but you're going to be faced with this and you'll be on your own. So the first thing I do is I would try and remember what each voice is doing. so that was in my head. You got to have that memorized. But then also you got to think about like, what chord is this? Because these are all about some notes moving to other notes in the chord. So analyze the chord first. That's a D, that's an A, that's an F. This is a D, this is a D minor chord, okay? So when we move, we need to move to other notes in the D minor chord. All right, so let's go through what happens in contrary motion voice exchange. The sopranos and the tenors move in opposite directions and exchange pitch names. Okay, so here's my soprano and here's my tenor, and they're going to move in opposite directions. And I'm going to make some mistakes here so that you can say, aha, that would be wrong. Because you could say I fulfilled that, but you can still do it wrong. Like for instance, if I take my sopranos up to there, that means these guys have to come down to there. Yes? Because the opposite direction, contrary motion voice exchange. But do you see how this went from D up to F and this went to A to F and they ended up on the same pitches? They didn't swap pitches. That's not possible to go in that direction for contrary motion voice exchange. You have to say, well, this is a D, so it's got to be an A. And we're not going to skip all the way up there. We're going to go to the adjacent place. So this is going to come down to the A, which means that this A, right, is going to go up in the opposite direction, right? And then the other part is the altos and the basses stay the same. All right, success, okay? And move with soprano. Move with soprano is the soprano moves up or down to an adjacent note in the chord, and the other upper voices do the same things, and then the bass doesn't change pitch. So you can choose, I think here, you can go up or you can go down because the ranges are going to be fine. You can choose to go up if you like. If you do, then you'll end up taking all of these other voices up. So this is an F, A, F, C. So we're in an F chord. So this has got to go up to the F, and this one would go up to the next one, which is the A, and this one would go up to the next one, which is the C. And then these people can stay there, although rightfully they could jump the octave too, and it would be fine. Okay, that's one possibility. Or if you want to go down, I'll go down in red. That's going up, right? If I wanted to go down, you could go down to the A, which means this one will go down to the C, right? You got to get your stems right to tell you which one it is. And this A here will go down to the F, and then your basses will just stay the same. So either of those will work, either direction. You get to choose, but you have to think contextually about ranges and things like that, okay? Similar motion voice exchange was when the altos and the sopranos move in the same direction. And the soprano makes a big skip, not to the next chord tone, but to the one beyond that. Now, again here, I just want to point out that if we go down, then first off, this is a B flat and a B flat and a D and an F. This is the B flat chord. That means that this is going to go not to here, but down to that note right there, right? And that's getting below soprano range, right? Not only that, this can't go down to there. That direction's not going to work. We have to go up, okay? So remember, it's when the soprano jumps beyond the first note to the next note, and it has to work out that these two are going to change. You can't always do this. Even if you want to, this has to be able to skip up to the same note that this is, although up an octave, right? It's going to work out if we go up, though. So this is not going to go up to B, because that's our next note, B flat. It's going to go up to D, right? That's going to go up to D, and this one is just going to come up to grab the note. See how they've moved in similar motion, same direction, right? This skipped not to the B flat, but the one above it, and then the D up to a D, and then the D came up and did this, right? We made a funny story out of that where it's like the sopranos call up the altos and say, hey, I'm going to a party tonight. And the altos go, oh, you're calling us to go with? And they're like, no, no, no. We're going to skip out and go way, way down, not to the high school, but to the college, right? And we need you to come over and get in our bed and pretend you're us and sleep so my parents don't know that we're there. And the altos do it. Oh, well. And then the tenors do nothing and the basses do nothing. Okay, good. Now there's one other way that this might work, and you can test yourself a little bit. can you recognize that? If we put a little bit of music in front of you, would you go, oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm just grab my hymnal, got a couple hymns sort of figured out. Let's take a look at this one right here. These are nothing special about the hymnal, but they have some classic songs. So let's just look right here for a minute. Okay, so this is the funeral song, right? And then it goes on, but oh Lord my God, right there. So let's just check this out. Now I picked these so that the setup is correct. There's two roots and a third and a fifth, and they're in root position, right? So it's a B flat chord here, B flat, D, F, okay? And the soprano goes down. Okay, so, and it's still a B flat chord here. Which method is it? So you should have presence of mind to think of the three methods and say, well, without even looking here very hard, like what's happening? And you can say, well, soprano's going down, the alto's going down, and the tenors are going down. Everybody's moving down. That's that one right there, move with soprano, right? The soprano moves down to the next note in the chord, the altos move in the same direction, and the tenors move in the same direction. It's move with soprano, and they move with soprano going up too, okay? All right, now this is a little contrived because you know that we're gonna hit all three, but maybe you don't know what order they're coming in. All right, this is also another funeral hymn, right? Just right here. Well, again, let's check out our chord first. E flat, B flat, E flat, G. So E flat, G, B flat. It's an E flat chord. We're in the key of E flat, right? Okay. The soprano's going up. What's everybody else doing? Don't dive too much into the weeds, just have a look at it. Well, the altos are staying the same. That ought to tell you something right there. And the tenors are going in the opposite direction. They're moving in contrary motion, right? And if we did this right, or they did it right, and the example's correct, then the soprano and the tenor will be exchanging pitches. This goes from a G up to a B flat, and the tenors go from a B flat down to a G. So they're moving in contrary motion, and they're exchanging voices or pitches. And look, the altos do nothing, and the basses do nothing. So this is contrary motion voice exchange. All right, one more. I bet you can guess which one this is going to be. These are actually harder to find because big skips in music don't happen as much in hymns. And so they're kind of rare and far between. This is one of my least favorite hymns. It's okay, you know. Yeah, it's not my favorite hymn. So I'm just going to play more of it. All right. By the way, did you catch that that's a half cadence right there? I'm in the key of G. You could hear that it doesn't have do here, right? Sorry. But let's look right here. I have a G and a G and a B and a D, right? See this large leap there? It didn't jump up to the G, it jumped up past it to the B, right? And look here, the altos were on a B and they went up to the D. So they have switched pitches, although they, you know, one has done a big skip, the other one hasn't. And the tenors and the basses do nothing. Similar motion voice exchange. Anyhow, these methods, plus the fourth method, which is to do none of these things or to do altered versions of these things, abound everywhere in the music of chorales, hymns, and even when you look at larger pieces at the structure of even big orchestral pieces and things like that, or things that look busy and have a lot of surface rhythm and stuff going on, you can usually boil it back and find similar things, unless the composer's trying to be, you know, argumentative. Okay, so should be able to define, give me the names, define them, compare and contrast their definitions, write them when given. It'll probably be set up similarly where the chord will be correctly notated first to figure out what that is so you know what notes you're moving to, and then you'll have to make the decision on whether you're going up or down or something, right? And then maybe there'll be examples of these that you'll have to say, which one is it? right? And again, it's just knowing your definitions well enough that you can think about them. All right. So then let's talk about small phrase forms. You are not going to have to look at scores yet. We're doing this so that we can be good at looking at scores, because every time we analyze music from here on out, we're going to be looking for these forms and seeing if they're there as well. So we'll be looking for cadences, and then we'll be saying, do these cadences make phrases that add up to small forms? And I've got the basic ones right here. Now, it's flashcards, but I'm just going to do these for you. I'm going to shuffle these up. And, you know, what I would do is I would test myself here. I would, I mean, you could watch it if you want and stuff, but at some point you should be able to just, of your own initiative, like I turn this over and it says, it's a parallel asymmetrical period. Let's talk about what that means. Period has a question and an answer section, antecedent and a consequent. And it's possible these could be three, and you know, more than two phrase periods, but the basic ones are two phrases. All right, so you should be able to say, okay, well, let's make a two phrase asymmetrical parallel period. So first off, you got to draw phrase number 1 and phrase number 2, right? And you have to say they're parallel, which means that you're going to call this one A because it has, you know, certain material that identifies it. Remember we talked about faces of this? And this one here is not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be similar enough that you'd call it A prime. Okay, so I have my question and my answer, my antecedent and my consequent, and two phrases, and this one is going to be A, and this one's going to be A prime, and that takes care of parallel because the material at the beginning of these phrases are similar. That's why we name them this way. Maybe not identical, but similar, recognizable. And then it's asymmetrical. You're going to have to make up some stuff here, but I wouldn't get too weird about this. Like I'm going to say this is 4 measures long, so it goes from 1 to 4. And then asymmetrical means that these two sections are not the same length. So make something up, like if this is 4 and this is 4, that would be 8, but then they'd be the same. So let's make this 6 measures long, so it's going to end at measure 10, right? And then we have to make it a period, which means that this is got a less conclusive cadence than that one. There's a bunch of different possibilities for that, but let's go like this. Half cadence and imperfect authentic cadence right there. Don't even bother with plagal cadences. We don't want to know about them. Don't use deceptive cadences on these. They're there, but you know, we're really talking about half cadences and authentic cadences. There you go. Parallel asymmetrical period. Think about what each one means and then just draw it out. Okay, we'll do another one here. A sentence. All right. So a sentence is a little idea, which they call X, and another little idea, which is a variant on that, which is X prime, and then stuff that eventually goes to, and we call it Y because it's different, to a cadence of any kind. I don't care if you put measure numbers in here because there's no symmetrical, asymmetrical, whatever. Generally, these are shorter and this is longer. And any cadence will do here as long as it's a cadence. So I have just created Mozart. Bum, 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 bum. And then bum, 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 bum. Same rhythm, same idea, different chord. It's also going down. And then dun dun na 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 na. There you go. Sentence. Mozart loves these things. He's not the only one though. All right. Repeated phrase. When is a period structure not a period? Well, when it's exactly the same. Remember, the defining thing that makes a period, as opposed to just that, is that this here is less conclusive than that one there. Well, the repeated phrase is literally the same phrase. So A will go PAC. It could be anything, it doesn't matter. And then has to be the same. A. It's literally like you put repeat signs on it. And that means that you could go like 4 and 8 or 2 and 4, but it has to equal out to be the same length for both. It's the thing that when you're so focused on trying to figure out what things are and name them as period structures and things like that, that can just sort of sneak up and spoil your time, because you go like, I don't know what it is, I can't figure it out. It's the same thing, and you're just gonna go, yeah, it's just repeated phrases. This is actually the format of most video game music these days. You know, if you are writing music and you just want a phrase, and then you're gonna loop it again until you leave the menu, well, there's no point in writing another phrase that's different. Just write something that's pretty or interesting, and then loop it again, and then loop it again. It's just repeated phrases. Okay, keep going. A parallel symmetrical period. Well, let's deal with this again. It's a period, so let's make ourselves a question and an answer phrase, right? And parallel, A and A prime, very similar to each other, but it is a period, so different from the phrases being repeated, these are gonna have to be less conclusive and more conclusive. We could do anything like we've done up here, but I could also go like imperfect authentic cadence and perfect authentic cadence. That would work. And then symmetrical means that they're going to be the same length. So if it's really slow music, maybe it's only 2 measures long and 2 measures long. Although you could just go 4 and 8 for many of these, and that's okay, right? Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Contrasting asymmetrical period. Well, it's like this. Right? It's asymmetrical. By the way, this could be the longer one and this could be the shorter one. There's music that comes like this and then kind of gets confused and noodles around a bit and then picks up and finishes. I've, just made this one longer. It could be either way, right? But what will happen is, so it's a period and one of the phrases is longer than the other. The areas are longer than the other, and it's contrasting, which means that this will be wildly different from this one, so that you would say they're not the same, they're not related. B. Okay? Phrase group. Well, it's when you have 2 or 3 or 4 phrases that don't make a period, and they're not repeated phrases either. So, like for instance, if you just want to keep it really simple, you could just go like this. You could do 2. I'm going to do 3. And you go like this. You go A. And you go like I, A, C. And then you can go like B, I, A, C. And then you can go C, half cadence. And I've skillfully avoided making any kind of period or repeated phrases. It's just a bunch of phrases. Phrase group, right? All right. Now, these are going to be contrasting symmetrical period. Is it going to be like this one right here? No, this one right here, right? This was a parallel symmetrical period, but I mean, again, you can vary the cadences, vary the measure lengths, but they're going to be the same length. But instead of this being similar material to this, it's that right there. Which leads us to our last one, which is lucky I shuffled this up and I didn't prearrange them, but double periods. I'm not even going to get too deep in the weeds on this one, but what I want to know from you is that it's where the question is so big it has 2 phrases in it. Sometimes you even see them like this. There's my question and there's my answer, like that. Okay? And you can label them how you want. I'm not going to worry about that, but the point is that there'll be a cadence here, and there'll be a cadence here, and there'll be a cadence here, because there's 4 phrases, right? And a cadence there. But it's this cadence and this cadence that matter on whether it's a period or not. And what I'm looking for here is you say it's a period where the antecedent, that's the question, right? Cedent is 2 phrases long. And the consequent section, the answer, is also 2 phrases long, right? I said, so we're in Wenatchee. I shouldn't say that. That's okay. Everybody can just look us up. And if we want to go to Spokane, so we're here. We want to go to Spokane. Oh, we want to go to Seattle. Okay? From Wenatchee. Well, we start to drive. We go over Blewett Pass, and then we keep going over Snoqualmie Pass, and then we end up in North Bend right here. And we stop because they've got an outlet place there and a Safeway, and we get gas, and people use the restroom, and we get food, and then we keep going. This is a pit stop. Phrase 1, phrase 2, right? I should have gone in the other direction, but that's the way it looks on a map. Everybody knows that this is not the important stop. I mean, it's important because we want to rest for a minute, but this is the destination. And then we come back and we stop again, and then we do this, right? The trip is so long that there's 2 phrases, but the middle one doesn't matter. It's not the important one. This determines at the end of the consequence, or the antecedent and the consequent section, right? Question and answer section, whether or not it's a period. Just as an aside, these are almost always going to be parallel. Almost always. Not 100%, but usually. Because by the time we do this and then do another phrase, we really need to hear this material come back again so we can be reminded that they're related to each other. All right. As I said, I'll check emails and things even though it's a holiday tomorrow. And you can talk to me on Tuesday at school as well when you have your training and not theory. But that's it right there. Right, so again, should be able to define what these are as a list and then what they are in parts. You should be able to find errors in pre-set up chords that have mistakes on how they're set up. Look at that worksheet that I gave you, rewatch that video. You should be able to give me the names of the methods for connection. You should be able to define them, right? And then you should be able to write them. And also, if I give you some hypothetical pieces of music that have them, you should be able to identify which is which. And you may be able to say, it's also none of the above. That's a possibility too. Finally, I'm not going to make you look at a bunch of scores and things. That'll take a lot of time. And we're trying to get you ready to look at scores and stuff and find the music that way. But you will have this kind of thing, and you'll have to draw these diagrams, right? Just take it piece by piece. Right? What does parallel mean? What does symmetrical or asymmetrical mean? What does contrasting mean? And then just keep the outliers in your head. What's a sentence? What does it mean to be a double period? What's the difference between all those things and just repeated phrases or a phrase group? Okay? And it should work out pretty well for you. Okay? This is a quiz not to make or break you. It's not midterms. It's still important, but it helps galvanize your study. So you say, where am I at? Can I actually use this information we've learned or not? Okay? All right. Cool. Have a great holiday, and I'll see you back at school when we get back to school.